Canada's economy in 2025, navigating uncertainty in a shifting global landscape. Welcome to the channel. Today, we will discuss the economy of Canada in 2025. As Canada moves through 2025, its economy finds itself at a critical juncture, grappling with persistent challenges while seeking pathways towards sustainable growth. The nation's economic landscape reflects a complex interplay of domestic policy decisions, global market dynamics, and structural transformations that are reshaping how Canadians work, invest, and plan for the future. The Canadian economy in 2025 is characterized by modest growth expectations and cautious optimism. Following a period of economic uncertainty that extended through 2023 and 2024, when high interest rates dampened consumer spending and business investment, the economy is showing signs of gradual stabilization. However, growth remains tepid compared to historical standards, with economists projecting GDP expansion in the range of 1.5% to 2% for the year, a figure that reflects resilience but falls short of robust recovery. This moderate growth trajectory stems from multiple factors. Consumer spending, which traditionally drives approximately 60% of Canada's economic activity, has been constrained by elevated household debt levels and the lingering effects of aggressive monetary tightening. While inflation has retreated from the peaks witnessed in 2022 and 2023, the cost of living remains elevated, particularly for housing, food, and essential services, leaving many Canadian households with diminished purchasing power. Monetary policy and interest rates. The Bank of Canada's monetary policy stance in 2025 represents a delicate balancing act. After maintaining elevated interest rates throughout 2023 and into 2024 to combat inflation, the central bank has begun cautiously adjusting its approach. The benchmark interest rate, which reached levels not seen in decades, has started to ease as inflationary pressures have moderated. However, policymakers remain vigilant, concerned about premature rate cuts that could reignite price growth or destabilize the economy. This monetary environment has profound implications across the economy. The housing market, which experienced significant corrections in 2022 and 2023, remains sensitive to rate movements. While some stabilization has occurred, housing affordability continues to rank among Canadians' top economic concerns, particularly in major urban centers like Toronto, Vancouver, and Ottawa, where property prices remain elevated despite market adjustments. For businesses, the interest rate environment has influenced investment decisions, with many companies adopting wait-and-see approaches to major capital expenditures. Access to credit, while not severely restricted, has become more expensive, prompting businesses to scrutinize projects more carefully and prioritize efficiency improvements over aggressive expansion. Labor market dynamics. Canada's labor market in 2025 presents a study in contrasts. The unemployment rate has edged upward from the historically low levels recorded in 2022, yet remains within reasonable bounds by long-term standards. However, this aggregate figure masks significant variations across sectors, regions, and demographic groups. Certain industries continue to face acute labor shortages, particularly in healthcare, skilled trades, and technology sectors. These persistent gaps reflect structural mismatches between available talent and employer needs, complicated by demographic trends as Canada's population ages and retirement waves accelerate in key professions. The federal government's immigration policies, which have maintained relatively high intake targets, are intended partly to address these labor market pressures, though integration and credential recognition challenges persist. Simultaneously, some sectors have experienced contraction and job losses, particularly in interest rate-sensitive industries like real estate and construction. Young workers and recent immigrants have faced particular challenges in navigating this uneven landscape, with underemployment remaining a concern even as headline unemployment figures suggest relative health. Trade and global integration. As a trading nation, Canada's economic fortunes remain closely tied to global markets, with the United States continuing to absorb roughly 75% of Canadian exports. The bilateral relationship, while foundational to Canadian prosperity, faces ongoing complexities related to trade agreements, regulatory alignment, and political dynamics that can shift with electoral cycles in both countries. Beyond North America, Canada has sought to diversify its trade relationships, pursuing opportunities in Asia-Pacific markets and strengthening ties with European partners. However, progress has been incremental, with structural dependencies and geographic realities maintaining the primacy of the U.S. relationship. Commodity exports, including energy products, minerals, and agricultural goods, remain crucial to Canada's trade balance, making the economy vulnerable to global price fluctuations and demand shifts. The energy sector, particularly oil and gas production centered in Alberta and Saskatchewan, continues to navigate a complex transition. While global demand for Canadian energy resources remains substantial, the sector faces pressure from climate policy considerations, both domestically and internationally. Investment in renewable energy and clean technology has accelerated, supported by federal incentives and provincial initiatives. Yet the pace of transition remains contentious, balancing economic imperatives with environmental commitments. Fiscal policy and government priorities. Federal fiscal policy in 2025 reflects competing priorities as the government manages substantial debt loads accumulated during the pandemic while addressing pressing economic and social challenges. The federal deficit, while reduced from pandemic-era peaks, remains elevated by historical standards, constraining the government's fiscal flexibility and sparking debates about spending priorities and tax policy. Key government initiatives focus on productivity enhancement, innovation support, and infrastructure development, areas where Canada has historically lagged compared to peer economies. Investment in digital infrastructure, including broadband expansion in rural and remote areas, represents a priority aimed at fostering more inclusive economic growth. Similarly, programs supporting research and development, particularly in emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and clean energy, seek to position Canada competitively in future-oriented industries. Housing policy has emerged as a critical focal point, with federal and provincial governments implementing various measures to address affordability concerns. These include incentives for new construction, reforms to zoning regulations, and programs supporting first-time buyers. However, the scale of the challenge remains daunting, with housing supply constraints, regulatory complexities, and land use restrictions limiting the effectiveness of policy interventions. Challenges and opportunities ahead. Looking forward, Canada's economy faces several structural challenges that will shape its trajectory beyond 2025. Productivity growth, a persistent weakness in the Canadian economy, requires attention through investments in technology, education, and business innovation. The country's relatively small domestic market and geographic vastness create inherent scale challenges that demand creative solutions and regional cooperation. Climate change presents both risks and opportunities. While transition costs and adaptation requirements pose economic challenges, Canada's abundant natural resources, including critical minerals essential for clean technology, position the nation to benefit from global decarbonization trends. Success will depend on effective policy frameworks that balance environmental objectives with economic competitiveness. Demographic trends, including population aging and changing immigration patterns, will continue reshaping labor markets and social programs. Managing these transitions effectively, ensuring newcomers integrate successfully while maintaining social cohesion and economic productivity, represents an ongoing imperative. Canada's economy in 2025 stands at a pivotal moment, navigating immediate headwinds while confronting longer-term structural questions. The path forward requires thoughtful policy, adaptability, and recognition that prosperity depends on addressing both cyclical pressures and fundamental economic architecture. As Canadians face these challenges collectively, the resilience and diversity that have historically characterized the nation's economy remain vital assets in uncertain times. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.